So, good morning, everyone. So, today, as I said, we have Environics Analytics with us, Greg Mortson. And today we're going to be talking about about the market research report that you are all going to be receiving, and about how data plays a role in your business and how it impacts your business on the main street. So, just so that you all know, everyone will be receiving a copy of their own personalized or customized market research report for their trade area. This webinar today is being recorded and will be available for review on our website, and I will let everybody know when that happens. So, without any further ado, I am going to introduce Greg Mortson from Environics Analytics. And he's going to run us through the data and what actually you will be receiving from the market research report. And then afterwards, I'll be talking a little bit more about how you can apply it for your specific business.
Okay, thank you so much, Ramona, for that. So yes, I'll be talking a little bit here about the reports themselves, how to interpret them. Ramona will go into a bit more detail, and then of course we'll open it up. And if you want to ask any questions, you can closer to the last third of our hour together, or you can always type things into the chat, and Ramona and I will be monitoring that as well. So thank you for joining us. I'm Greg Mortson. As Ramona said, I'm an account manager here at Environics Analytics. So I work with a lot of public sector clients primarily. So municipalities, provinces, cities, and federal agencies as well. And today I'm lucky enough to work with some smaller businesses, which I love. So this is our fourth session together. So it's been great, and I love connecting and helping smaller businesses. Just a little in terms of what Environics Analytics does really quickly, we offer a lot of data about Canadian households and about the Canadian population. So first and foremost, we have information all the way down at a postal code level. So we have all sorts of data at a postal code level that tells our clients about who lives there, what their likely demographics are, what their behaviors are. And I'm going to walk you through a lot of that data today so you get a little flavor for what it is we provide. We also have more advanced analytics as well, modeling, site selection, things like that. And then finally, we do have some software offerings as well that help leverage our data. So we're very much about here's your data. Now let's work together to help you get the most out of it, or insights as we call it here. So looking forward to helping you with that today. As Ramona said, you'll be getting your market research report, which is going to have a lot of information in it for you. A lot of it might confirm what you already know about your market, but hopefully there'll be some new nuggets in there that can help you maybe make some different decisions to increase your customer base and to attract people to what you do. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how to interpret the report. I'll touch on how you can use some of these insights. Ramona has a lot more experience working with businesses like yourselves, so she's going to get into the nitty-gritty and how it can fit into your context. So as I said, very excited. This type of data we usually supply to larger organizations that they work with, but so this is a real treat being able to offer this to you. As I said, you'll get all up-to-date demographic information. So all the data you're going to be seeing here is for 2024. So really up-to-date demographic information, lifestyle behaviors, what people consume in terms of media, what are their values or attitudes that drive behavior. So these are all pieces of information I'm going to go through today. And I'm just going to go through little snippets of each data set, but I'm going to arm you with the tools to be able to interpret it all. So that's my goal today. So when you get your reports, all the information that you see, all the values that you see and data points are going to be about households and populations within your what we call a trade area. So there's a lot of different ways to create trade areas. For these standardized reports, what we have done is we've classified all the businesses into either a rural business or an urban business. And that classification has helped us create an appropriate trade area around it. So for example, businesses that we've classified as rural, we've created a 15-minute drive time area around it. So what that means is that every household within that boundary can get to your location within 15 minutes. If it's 20 minutes, that household in that population is not included in the analysis. For more dense urban areas or businesses that the CUI is classified as urban, we've created a 50-minute walk time. So a very smaller area, again, where all the households can get to your location within 15 minutes. So that's how we've delineated these your businesses. So each one will be unique to where your business is on the ground and then the appropriate area around it. And you can see a couple of examples here. On the left-hand side, you can see an example of a 15-minute walk time. We're zoomed in a lot closer here because even though these trade areas look the same size, the map on the left, you can see some of the streets. We're zoomed in quite a bit, so it's a smaller, tighter area. On the right-hand side, we've zoomed out to accommodate the much larger 15-minute drive time. So just a couple of examples, and you can see how the boundary contours are sort of laid out around the street network. So an interesting way in which it's a more refined way than just a radius, is which some businesses do. So the first category of data that I'm going to talk about here today is demographics. This is really that foundational level of data that we use in order to describe the Canadian population. This is based on the most recent census from Statistics Canada, which is 2021. We use all sorts of other information to model that or estimate that for our current year. So again, all the data you're going to be seeing here today is for 2024, which is a big value in and of itself. And then you can see some of the different categories of demographic data at the bottom here that will provide to you, things about the population, the household sizes and incomes, education levels, employment tendencies, as well as different diversity measures. So all those pages are going to be included in the report you're going to get. I'm going to just touch on one page in terms of the demographics here and a couple of variable examples. And this is a very important concept here, is this idea of an index, which I'll get to in a second. So what we're looking at in the top right-hand corner, I'm just pulling out one example here, and this looks at the family status of households within your trade area. And again, all the data you see here is about households in the population in that trade area that we've defined for your business. So you can see here that 18.8% of the households within your trade area are classified as total lone parent families. So that's an important piece of information in and of itself. And the index below that is telling me how that value compares to the rest of the province. So if Ontario has 18.8% total lone parent families, the exact same, that index value will be 100. So that's our baseline, will be an index of 100. Because this is 112, it's telling me that households within my trade area are 12% higher when looking at the percentage of total lone parent families. So this trade area is over-indexing for this variable. When I look at this marital status variable right next to it, we can see that 52.5% of the households within my trade area are classified as married or common law couples. So that's the predominant marital status in this trade area. But you can see the index below there is 93. So what that is telling us is that that's actually 7% lower than the Ontario average. So this value is under indexing for this trade area when compared to the rest of the province. So what we're doing here is we're putting these values into context for you. So helping you make sense of these values to let you know, is it high, is it low, based on the provincial average? Or think of it another way, what makes my trade area unique? What makes the people and the households in my area unique? And how does that help me connect with them better? How do I make decisions about my business in light of this information to help me better serve them? So a few ways in which you could use these insights, for example, are there a lot of families in the trade area? Are there a lot of children? How old do those children tend to be? How does that influence the type of services that I provide for households and families in my area? What's the marital status? Does that change my mix of services or my pricing? Are there old people or young people? How does that change things? What's the ethnicity or diversity levels of people in my area? How does that influence my services? And of course, income level is one too. Are they higher income, lower income? These are also things that can help you when making decisions about your business. So all little pieces of information that you can leverage to learn more about the population and households that you're serving. So that's the demographics. Again, very important for just about all businesses, small or big, to really help you understand more about your neighborhood. And as I said, it's going to confirm a lot of things you probably already know and may give you some surprises too. The next section we're going to look at here is the shopping and eating. So this starts to tap into some of the behavioral aspects of the people within your trade area. How do they behave when it comes to going to stores and consuming services? So in this case, we're looking at pet supply stores. So it's important to think about where are people going when you're offering some services, because sometimes you'll want to align around what these behaviors are. So if, for example, if you're a dog walking service, how would this information help you? So on the left-hand side here, what we've done is we've ranked the stores that people have shopped at over the past year in terms of the percentage of the population that has gone there. So for example, for Pet Value, that's our top pet supply store for this trade area. It's almost 30% of the people within this trade area go to that store. And you can see from the index that actually over indexes. So it's 20% higher for people in this trade area when compared to the province of Ontario. The section on the right is where we've ranked it by index. So the way we can look at this is, okay, how are, again, the people and the households within my trade area, how are they different than what's happening in the rest of the province? So you can see here that we've ranked department stores at the top in this case. And we've ranked them highest because they're 168 index, or they're 68% higher than the provincial average for shopping for pet supplies at department stores. So that's our top over-indexing category, and that's why it's ranked at the top. But it's also important to see this percentage here. So even though it's very different than some of the habits we're seeing provincially in this trade area, still only almost about 10%. So again, it's not as high as the Pet Value as we've seen, but it is something that is unique about this trade area, which might change the way you approach households and the populations there. So if I'm seeing that households or people in my neighborhood tend to show a preference for formal wear, should I be offering more services aligned to this type of purchasing behavior? I mentioned the dog walking services. Maybe I'm a handyman and, I see a lot of people at a Canadian Tire, a very simple example that you probably would already know, but it's nice to have data that backs up some of these decisionings that really gives you confidence in the ways you're spending money in order to get people to use your service. The next section I'll talk about here is media behaviors. So how do people consume pieces of information or media, things like that. And then we're going to look at the internet, mobile phone, and we also have traditional media highlights as well. I'm going to get to social media in a second, but here we're looking at these three high-level categories. And in particular here, we're looking at television. So you'll also see a section on radio, newspapers, magazines. It's all formatted the exact same. So I'm going to give you the tools to be able to interpret this, and then you can use it for other sections as well. So for television, what we're saying here is this percentage field here, and we can see 19.72 for heavy viewership. What this is saying that 19.72% of the people within my trade area consider themselves heavy television viewers, okay? When I see base percentage here, that's the percentage of Ontarians that would classify themselves as heavy television viewers, and that's 15.81. To arrive at that index, we're just comparing those two percentages to get at 125. So people in my trade area are 20%, 25% higher or more likely to consider themselves a heavy television viewer. So it's a really quick and easy way to say, okay, people in my trade area love TV and are heavy television viewers. So you're going to see that same those same categories for all these different media channels. And for each of them, you'll see below here what they're doing inside those channels. So for example, here for television, what programs are they tuning into? So you can see in this trade area, curling is very popular when in season. That index is 145. So they're 45% more likely to watch curling in my trade area than the rest of the province. So how does that knowledge influence, some of the services I provide? Maybe not at all, but a lot of times it's just helping you develop a more holistic view of who people are in your neighborhood so that you're more attuned to what they need. So for example, you can also get from this section of the report, who listens to podcasts. Maybe people in my trade area really like them. Should I consider advertising there? Do people enjoy fashion and beauty related content online? That's another piece of information you'll get. Should I be trying to connect with more consumers there on an online channel? Do they still read flyers in my trade area or, my community newspaper? Should I keep going with those sorts of advertisements? And then you can start to see, okay, what section of a newspaper do they look at? Maybe I want to try to get my small advertisement in that one particular section of the newspaper to better connect with people. So this is all around internet, your mobile phone usage, and then more traditional media as well. But we also have social media here too. So we have behaviors around different social media channels that households and people use in your trade area. So in this example, we're looking at Instagram. So we can see that 47.2% of the people in my trade area currently use Instagram. And we can see that that index is 112. Again, that's letting me know that people in my trade area, 12% more likely to be looking at or using Instagram than the rest of the province. Yeah, and again, you can see similar to what we looked at for the other media channels, you can see what activities they're doing on a daily basis within each of these social media feeds. So for Instagram here, you can see that it's ranked based on the percentage of what people do on this channel in your trade area. So 9.2% of people in the trade area view photos or videos. 6.5% of the people like photos and videos when they're Instagram. 5% of people watch live videos through Instagram. And again, you can see how that compares to Ontario, which are those lighter bars here in these charts. So again, it gives you an indication of what the behaviors are in these different channels and then how that compares to Ontario, what makes people in my trade area unique. So some of the different social media channels we see here, Snapchat is one. So maybe it's popular in your trade area, especially probably if it's a younger crowd. How should maybe I should double down on advertising or start advertising on this channel. Facebook still very popular, even though everybody says it's dwindling. You'll see when you start working with this data, a huge percentage of people still use Facebook. How do I better reach people on this platform? And how can I use some of the other information I've learned about the demographics or behaviors to start modifying the content in these different channels that so I really have the best chance of connecting with consumers that live there. Also, Twitter or X, we have information there as well. Maybe I see that people don't tend to watch videos through Twitter. That's fine. Maybe I shouldn't spend money on that video I was planning to for Twitter. Um, Oftentimes, you're also able to see, are people comfortable sharing personal information on social media in my trade area? If they are, maybe you should feel free to elicit an email address so that they can join your mailing list or a newsletter that you send out. So it may be a really good way to get emails of people who live in your area. So those are some of the ways in which you can start thinking about social media behavior and those tendencies in your trade area to start attracting more of an audience. The next section of information is all about expenditures or how people within your trade area are spending money. So this looks at these major household categories. So in addition to seeing, so in the top left there, you see 72,032. That's annually. How much does the average household spend, just spend in general, right? And it's about $72,000 a year. You can also see how much the average household earns in a given year, which in this case is 97,754. So both of these, you can see the indexes there. Both of these measures are below the provincial average, but you can start to see what your potential is for people, at least in that immediate trade area that you're servicing in terms of the dollars spent. And you can also start to look at what different categories they're spending that $72,032, $72,032. And you can see here at tobacco and alcohol, on average, they're spending $2,991 per household on that category. We have a lot of these categories in these reports. You see also household furnishings here, clothing, there's lots of others. You can see how much how much they're spending per year per household, and then the percentage of their total expenditures that are going to this category. So even though you can see they're spending less on tobacco and alcohol than the provincial average, they're actually, as a percentage of their total expenditures in this trade area, it's actually a bit higher than what we're seeing in the rest of the province. So you can start to see the actual dollars as well as the percentage of their overall earnings per year that they're making. So very interesting set of data. We have a lot of different categories here. We also have food categories too, so you can start to see how much you're spending on food. In this case, $11,769 per year per household. You can see how much you're spending on restaurants and how much you're spending from stores. And we also get into different types of stores or products. So here you can see I've highlighted bakeries. On average, they spend annually $525 per household at bakeries per year. You can see that that is, again, an index of 70, indicating it's 30% less than the provincial average. But again, it's more of their bigger percentage of their total expenditures on food for a given year at 7.7% or 103 index. So again, you're able to dig into some of these specific food categories and how does that align with some of your services that you're providing. You know, you can start to understand perhaps people spend more, you know, on I know one of them is fish, for example. Maybe I want to, you know, somehow tailor my services around that. You can see different categories like home electronics. How does that compare to the provincial average? You know, maybe there's more seniors as well. Should I be offering more technical support services if that's what the services that you provide? How do I tailor my support services to support, you know, seniors and their, you know, their expenditures on home electronics? We could see gardening equipment. So maybe there's an opportunity for more on-site consultation for local gardeners. You could see people love to go to perhaps local movie theaters. Is there some way I can partner with my local movie theater knowing that people in my trade area tend to go to these movies. How can I, maybe target my services to that audience in some sort of partnership with my local theater? So all different ways in which you can use expenditure data to start influencing decisions around the services that you provide. I think another really interesting one for this crowd would be our psychographic data. These are the values the people in my trade area hold. So very interesting set of data here that allows you maybe to slightly tweak your messaging to better tap into what those values are of people in your trade area, because those values are what ultimately drives their behaviors. So in this case, this example here, we're looking at those strong values like global consciousness is right at the top. So people in this trade area tend to, or more likely to consider themselves citizens of the world, right, over their community or even country. So how do you really tap into that global mindset amongst people within your trade area? Do you position your services in that broader global context, right? And maybe you start to draw on other cultures to influence what you provide. So again, these are things you can look at to understand what are the attitudes and beliefs of people in your trade area. And equally important is things that or those values that people tend not to believe. So in this example, we're seeing that people really don't have that attraction to nature that we're seeing in the rest of the province. So for whatever reason, people in the trade area aren't that attracted to nature, or at least not at the same level as people from the province. So maybe I don't want to show imagery of people in a park or in a forest when I'm posting something to Facebook, right? So maybe I decide to show a family, at a downtown cafe, or, those are the kinds of little changes that you can make to really better connect with people in your neighborhood, almost at sort of that subconscious level. But it's really just aligning yourself to what are those values of people in your trade area. So other values would be things like focus towards health. If people in my trade are over-indexing for that, how do I really tap into people's desire for that healthy lifestyle? Or people maybe index low for xenophobia. So how do I really promote, an ethnically diverse mix of services, celebrating other cultures from the world? Or maybe people really have an enthusiasm for technology in my trade area. So how do I better connect to them through online channels, or maybe it's even an app? So these are all ways in which you can use these values to really engage with people in a meaningful way within your trade area. The last section I have here is all about our segmentation system. So this is a data product that we provide and from, this is Environics Analytics, probably one of our flagship data products. And what it does is it takes a lot of different variables from across everything we have available to us, again, all the way down to a postal code level. And we categorize residential postal codes, everyone across the country, into one of 67 segments. And each of these segments have all sorts of information, not only demographics, but behaviors and values baked into them. So what you can imagine is that everybody within a segment and within these postal codes are likely to exhibit the same types of demographics and behaviors. And so this data set is all built on the idea that people tend to move into areas or postal codes where the rest of the people tend to look like them. So that's one foundational piece. I'd say the other is it also taps into that idea that once you move into a neighborhood, you start inheriting those behaviors of the people around you. So both of those influences are sort of what's driving this homogeneity around at the postal code level. So, and we're not suggesting that everybody in every postal code is exactly the same. What we're really hoping to provide is what are the tendencies and the proclivities of people within different postal codes, so you're better able to communicate with them and engage with them. So what you're seeing on the right here is just a map of postal codes in Victoria, and you're just seeing they're color coded by the different segments that each one of them fall within. And you can see the clustering that starts to happen around these different neighborhoods. So one page of your report will look at those top 5 segments that fall within your trade area. So in the example we're looking at here, the top segment is something that we call social networkers, right? We do have a little bit of a description about them. They're the youngest of all the segments. They're in the transient world of cultural diverse singles living in older city apartments, right? And you could say that they're mostly single, they live in crowded neighborhoods, they're in larger cities. So there's a lot of information you can get here, all the way down to things like exercise, right? Behaviors. So many of these folks treat exercise as religion, working out at a fitness club or joining pickup sports games. For media, these go on the go 20-somethings rely on their mobile phone. So you're getting a lot of information that is data driven about the people who live in your area. And again, a lot of this is going to be folks maybe you already know, but you might uncover some categories of people that you don't see or aren't as evident in your area that you didn't know live there at quite the levels that they do. So very important piece of information and valuable that you can leverage to quickly get a sense as to who lives in your neighborhood. So maybe you'll see, as we saw, a lot of social networkers. They love to stay fit. How do I align myself around people like that? Maybe you'll see some on their own again segments popping up in your trade area. These are folks that are new retirees whose kids have long since left the nest. How knowing that type of information and maybe some information about their level of affluence, how do I perhaps offer some senior discounts? How do I draw them into my store or have them start to sign up for my services? And then finally, there may be a group like the Savvy Seniors. This is a more affluent, older audience, but they have money to spend. How do you tailor your services to this crowd, knowing that, let's say 20% of the households in your trade area fall into this category. So very important piece of information here to help you really understand more about households and the audience there. So that wraps up my part of the presentation, hoping to give you more of a sense of how to interpret the reports once you get them. Also giving you some ideas as to how to connect and use that from your businesses and ways in which you can start thinking about the insights. I'm going to pass it over to Ramona here, who's going to start to get into a lot more details. She knows a lot more about the small business landscape across the country. So I'll hand it over to her for how to use the insights.
Thanks so much, Greg. I'm just going to ask if anybody has any questions right now, just on the stuff that Greg presented. So a couple of different ways. You can unmute your mic, or if you have a question right now, you can ask it in the chat. If we don't see anything, I'll go into my kindness section and we can open up the questions at the end of the presentation. So one of the really key things, so just so that you guys understand, I am a business coach. I've been in this sphere for a number of different years. I'm also an entrepreneur in my own right. So I've owned product-based businesses and service-based businesses. And that's why I really love the whole concept of personal services or service as an industry. Okay. And this is really important that for all of you who are running service-based industries, services are based on experiences and feelings, how we feel about it. A product is something you can see, touch, feel. You can put it in a bag, you can take it home, you can look at it. When we're talking about a service that someone receives, it really is about the experience. and how the person views that after having been in contact with you. And so that becomes very, very important in terms of the marketing that you're doing, in terms of, are you doing it for the right group of people? And do you have their true need? Have you identified the need of the people that you are trying to reach out to? Becomes really, really important. So, one of the things that I'm going to say, when we partnered with Environics Analytics, the goal of what we're trying to do, you guys have brick and mortar locations. You are paying rent or you own a building. And we have to try to figure out ways that we can get the most number of people walking through your front door, purchasing your services. And we're looking at just a Main Street community. And that's why we kind of focused on where your location is and how do you make sure that you are part of your community and people recognize you as a community builder. And one of the very first things, I'm a real lover of Simon Sinek, if you've ever heard of him. And one of the premises that he has established over the years in business is really that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And so a lot of the data that Greg and his team has put together for you guys really does focus on some of the psychographics of the people in your community, their values, attitudes, and beliefs. And this is something that when you have a service-based industry, it really does focus on these psychographics. Demographics is one part of it, but the values, attitudes, and beliefs. So if I look at the people in the room today, we have people in aesthetics, we have people offering uh, sort of different services. We have them offering services for kids, lessons, classes, individual personalized things. So some of the things that we're going to talk about to keep in mind is, especially in the services, there's a difference between who is purchasing the service and who is the end user of the service. So one of the things that we need to think about is if our services are targeted towards children, we have to promote how it is that we are, what it is that we are doing for the children, classes, things that we're offering for them, but what's the value that my agency does? And does that meet the need of the parent or grandparent that may be buying that service for that child? If we're looking at aesthetics or things that are for me, okay, and I look at hair and nails and all of that, are we meeting the needs of our client base? Okay. And so even if you have a gym, okay, one of the best examples that I can give you is just because you have a gym and you offer classes or you have equipment, not everyone is the right person to come into your gym. So one of the basic key rules of running a business, not everyone is your customer. You have to find the people that are your best customer or are your tribe based on what it is that you provide. And the example that I always give, you guys know by looking at me, I am not young. Okay, I am in my 60s. Okay, and so if you have a gym or a service and all of your marketing materials are showing 20 something people who can do everything perfectly, okay, I am not going to see myself in that scenario. And this is where it becomes really important. And I say to my customers, oh my goodness, I am assuming that all of you have very, very limited incomes or ability to pay for advertising, marketing, and promotion. If you had endless amounts of money, you can hire a bunch of people. But right now, you have to focus on what you have the ability to do with the limited resources you have. So, going back to my example, that if you are trying to target people like me, having pictures of people that don't look like me or showing me video clips of people that don't look like me will make it that I will never even walk in your door to have the initial discussion with you. And this is really important that people are expecting everybody to walk through their door and sign up right away. And that doesn't necessarily happen because you haven't given me a reason to be there. And so, one of the key things that I ask you all to look at is what problem or need are you solving for a very particular type of customer? And that needs to be what you need to be marketing, okay, especially in the services sector. The other interesting things about services is the fact that if you have a product and you've purchased it and all of a sudden the bottle is empty, there's an immediate need for you to go out and repurchase that item. You don't have any more of it, you go to the store. With services sometimes, and I know that you guys all probably find this, is that people are a lot less likely to remember, or they wait until things become a dramatic need. So I always say about the aesthetics, nails, hair, anything like that. Do you have something in place that reminds people of their need? Okay. I'm a really big believer that if you have a service-based business, if you do not have a system where you book the next appointment while someone is sitting with you, you now exponentially reduce your income. If you don't have a way to remind them that they have an appointment and that they have the ability to cancel or move it, this is something, because when we're dealing in an industry that's service-based, every hour, every 15 minutes, every 30 minutes, if someone doesn't show up, it's an empty chair, it's an empty space. If you don't have enough people for your class, then you have to cancel the class. There are other people that have lost out. So we really do need to look at, how do people consume, or what is their means? So Greg had talked about social networkers, that they do everything on their mobile device. Do you have a booking system that integrates with people's mobile devices? Okay. Or are you making me go old school and have to look you up and find you and then remember that I have an appointment? Okay. Becomes really important in the service business that you have to provide me with the tools. And just as I was talking today, or as Greg was talking, I got a reminder from my veterinary clinic that my dog is due to have her nails done. And I have the ability to go, here's your appointment. Are you going to be attending? Yes or no? They've now done this 4 days in advance of my appointment. And I said, yes, I'm going to be there. It gives me the opportunity to even put it in my calendar. And so this is very, very important in a service-based industry. But how do you differentiate yourself from other people in the community who may be offering the same services? And this comes down to, what is your value proposition? How are you letting people know? And so when Greg was talking about the psychographics and global consciousness being really, really a high indicator in this group, how are you letting your customers know that you and your staff and the way that you do things embodies this? Okay. Now, one of the other ways that we can do this, and I'm going to say this, and a lot of people hate me for this, please do not hire a professional to do your marketing. Okay. One of the things that, having worked on the My Main Street program now for the 2 iterations, the number of people that have paid a professional an extraordinary amount of money to create the perfect picture, to create the perfect ad that they would create for anybody who is in the same industry. And then they all start to look generic. When you actually look at what Greg said and people's use of Instagram, people are really keen. They really want to see the videos. Okay, when you look at the internet and Instagram and TikTok starting, it was all about watching regular people dancing, dogs dancing, cats dancing, and people were sharing this. It was unscripted. It was done on, like, cell phones. It was not professional. People resonate with things that look genuine. So realistically, it is much more important for you to post a 30-second live clip of you and your staff doing what you do than it would be to get some really slick professional photos done and spending thousands and thousands of dollars. Okay. So again, I'm speaking to people who have limited amounts of money, and you have to be able to stretch it as far as you can. People want to see you. They want to have a relationship with you and your staff, know why it is that you do what you do. And so these little organic type things, okay, are way more important. One of the other things that we talked about in terms of being in a community and having a brick and mortar is, people want to see you involved in the community. Okay, people don't want to always see ads where it's, hey, we have a special, hey, here's the deadline, hey, here's what we charge for haircuts, here are all of our services, blah, 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 blah. I can see the exact same thing from 100 different retailers. Okay. What they want to see is you in the community. What do you do? How are you involved in the community? Okay, so especially for those of us that do services, okay, it could be doing things with the Special Olympics, doing, sponsoring a soccer team, the little kids, having them run around the community with the name of your business on their back, being that you are a community supporter. The wonderful thing about Canada and Canadians is the fact that we really do believe in reciprocity. If someone does something nice for us, it is inherent that we must do something that gives back. So if you have done something for my kid by sponsoring their soccer team, I have the need to want to help you and promote your business as being someone who did something for me. Really, really, really important in terms of what it is that you are doing. And so that's going to be the key. Use this data to figure out how you can differentiate yourself in your market. And I always say, if you have someone who does the same thing, your competitors are not your enemies. They're not people that you have to try to, hunt down and destroy their business to make your business better, okay? Um, but there are things that you can learn from your competitors and work with your competitors. Okay, figure out where each of you has a very great target market, where what you do is different from this person who does the same type of service, but their target market is different. And how can you cross refer and promote becomes really, really important. When we're talking about services as well, guys, also look at things like coffee shops, doctor's offices, anything like that could be complementary to what it is that you guys are doing. Okay, so if you're offering, safety, security, if you're offering Taekwondo or Tai Chi classes to seniors, let the doctors or the services that reach with seniors, let them know that this is what you do and why you do it. Okay, can be very, very important. One of the examples as well that Greg gave was the fact of TV viewing. If you look at the list of what TV shows people watched, okay, again, to my point about sponsoring the soccer team, you saw that people love curling in this community. Okay, maybe you need to be having your information at the curling rink, on the rink on the outside in the advertising. It could be the same thing for hockey in the community. So let's look at ways that we build up the community. My other retailers this morning talked about the fact that, but Ramona, there's homelessness, there's encampments, there's mental health. As well, when we talk about you being good corporate and community citizens, how are ways that you and your business and your staff can get involved with being part of the solution, not just complaining about the problem? What can can you start a community group that talks about this? Can you be a leader in this? Can you offer a class about self-defense or, how you would deal with this or even, giving lessons to people about this? This is all really important in terms of the services. So I'm going to say there's 101 ways that you don't need to spend a lot of money, but when you have the proper data and you've got that information, okay, this is about incremental steps. You don't need to do all of this or totally change what you're doing. And we did have a business last year. They got their market research report, saw that Instagram was a really big thing, and they ended up putting all of their marketing money in Instagram, and then were upset that it didn't generate all this business that they had identified. Okay, even if you advertise on Google, guys, and you have the best SEO, all right. Even Google will admit it takes 8 to 12 months for any of your efforts to even have a blip on Google radar. So even though you're paying for it, doesn't mean that there's an immediate transactional type of thing. So what you need to learn to do is be in the spaces, now if you're trying to reach people like me and you're on Snapchat, we're not connecting because I'm not a Snapchat user, as are most people of my age group. But if you were in Facebook, I can find you. If you were trying to reach my daughters, yes, Snapchat would be where you might want to be talking about things. Okay. So all of this is about what are incremental changes that you might be able to make based on the data that you've received. So I'm going to stop my discussion at this point. I'm just going to see if there are any questions that you have. And if not, if there's nothing that's pressing from what Greg and I have said, we can just we can end this session and know that you guys will be getting a copy of your market research reports. I'm trying to do it later this weekend. I'm trying to get it done over the weekend for Monday so that you have it. Is what we are looking at. And then you can always reach out to your portfolio manager if you have some specific questions about how this might relate to you and your business, that we might be able to provide you with some additional assistance. So I am not seeing anything, Greg. So
Okay.
at this point in time, I am going to stop the recording and end today's session. And know that the market research report and a copy of this webinar will be available on our site. I will let all of the businesses know when it is available for them. And you can go back in and look at this at any point in time. Again, I want to thank Greg Mortson and Environics Analytics for assisting us with being able to provide this data to you. And I look forward to helping you all grow your businesses in your communities. So thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.